we look at the study that your team, has just released, and can you put that into context for us? You used your AI model used natural language processing. Anyone's guess whether I'm reading this off my screen or I knew this. You used this model. You analyzed search terms, both public search and private search. So can you share a little bit of context? It's a small scale study, would you say? And is it also one of the first studies you've seen in this area, and some of the findings?
Sure, and there's a bunch of things there. I think let me just address them one by one. I don't want to just address one point first. If you look at the size of the actual numbers we looked at, it's not small. I don't remember the exact number right now, but it's like just on anxiety, right, which is a very niche thing. There's about 11 million searches alone, right? That's a lot of
That's
actual.
a lot.
Yeah. And even if you take like maybe, if you're like me, you search for the same thing 30 times a day, you still are looking at over north of a million in terms of a sample, right? So I think from a volume
No,
perspective,
that's a point well taken. I was just looking at the, you said, your team said 200 search terms, and in my head I was like, oh, that's
oh,
just
yeah,
200
no,
search.
no, no. Those are the
Completely wrong.
keywords. So those are
Yeah.
the keywords. So anxiety, I'm sad, suicide. So there were
Hmm.
200 of those, but those words allowed us to unlock the volume of demand and search.
Wow.
So it's madness, right? How much
That's
it is, and I think that one of the just as a footnote, and we can get back to it later, but search is actually an inner monologue you have with yourself. It's not a public, like you tweeting me tweeting you, us having banter and all of that stuff. Like search is the only private space that we have where we're asking questions that we're too afraid to ask other people, that we're asking questions that we want quick responses to, right? It's this like libidinal connection with this large vast repository of potential answers that's constantly happening. So for me, the volume of that is quite remarkable. So that's the first thing. On the other piece, I think from a offline perspective, and I know you didn't ask this, so I'm just like just trying to clarify it in my own mind, is that India, as you know, is a very very complex space, and a large chunk of those people that live in India are online, and there's a lot of on a very basic level, and I'm not talking about sophisticated mental health issues that are best left to professionals, but on a basic level, a lot of these young individuals coming online face a lot of pressure to do well academically, right? Excel in school, uh, and there's not enough. Space for a lot of these young people uh, if their aspirations do not match the expectations of what society has in mind for them. And this is a universal problem, as you know. It's like it was there when you and I were growing up, it was there when our parents were growing up, and when their grandparents were growing up. There's always a gulf between uh, who you're expected to be and who you want to be in some shape or form. And it's fundamentally a question about control, and about control about who you are, and what you want to do with your future. And so I think in that tension, what is happening now is earlier we just repress it and move on, right? We'd be like, okay, we grin and bear it. But now all of these conversations have opened up spaces for us to, as young people, when we were young, to consider this and treat these seriously. And there have been networks of support groups, but they haven't embedded themselves as strongly. The social culture dynamics haven't shifted as strongly. So we actually are in a very, very strange position, from an outsider speaking, looking in, where mental health is, of course, a conversation everyone's having. It's okay to talk about stuff, right? It's okay to flag these, and there is a space for it. But the worst thing about that is that there's a space for discussion, but there's no space for action. There's no space for social change around that. There's no actual like practical support. So it's like the idea of, yes, you have an ear, but you don't have my money, right? Like that's the situation we are in. And so I think a lot of these kids are turning online for help, and it's sort of sometimes the help isn't actually that good. and it's sort of spiraling into this bigger and bigger crisis where half formed opinions, half research Google stuff, like some random YouTuber with some admonishing tone is all kind of like creating this ecosystem of very strange things. Like I don't know if you've ever like searched for like encouragement or any of these things online which these kids might be looking for, and you'd get these very aggressive men saying, "Don't be weak, be stoic, run hard," right? Like that'd be one part of the thing, and the other part of the thing is like, "It's okay, you can hide, cover yourself, watch some Tumblr, be kind to yourself," and I'm like, "What the fuck," right? Right? Between those two, there has to be something. You can't be like like soul Hulk with not a single emotion, or like little Tumblr like ephemeral creature. Like those are very bad solutions to any.
Yeah, and the other one is that someone brought up recently that there is this whole toxic positivity side as well, right? Like which is just
Toxic
be okay
positivity.
no matter what. So you'll see, yeah, there is this pressure. So you what you've highlighted is really interesting because even offline, what we hear often is that there are a lot of well-intentioned people trying to raise awareness, trying to tackle stigma by saying it's okay, we should be talking about these things. And I think that's really important, right? Open a window for a conversation so no one feels demonized or othered because of what they're going through. But the ethics of doing that when there's no actual service or infrastructure to support where people actually go for help. So that's interesting to me. That's like a parallel directly with the offline world. Did you find anything that surprised you, has stayed with you, or that you want to see as an intervention point, whether it's policymakers, journalists, anyone interested in this space?
All right, so let's split it up into like a couple of things, right? So the first is it's a very big problem, right? And I think that's the first thing we need to all sit back and talk about. It's not a people like us problem. It's not a Twitter problem. It's not an urban problem. It's not a rural problem. It's not an education problem. It's not a gender problem. It's a problem. I mean, not a problem. It's a thing, right? So we need to just get a head out of the ground as I mean I know you have your head out of the ground, but I'm just I think a lot of us need to just step back and say, okay, this is a thing, this is not some random thing that happens occasionally. So that's the scale and magnitude of it is what surprised me. The second is, and this is, so I have two things in my head right now. It's like, oh, do I say this, do I not say it? But I'll say it, right? Like I'm going home, like I think it's a fake news problem, actually, right? And hear me out, right? If you spend some time on, let's say, YouTube or this toxic positivity piece or any of the stuff that we see, I'm going to just craft a journey for you, right? So you open up your phone one day and you say, "Mujhe stress hai," right? That's like, that's, let's say, an input you give in. The search engine knows you're a woman. The search engine knows that you're like Hindi speaking, and therefore is curating results to give you information around that. In most cases, you'll get some, I would say, like some sort of psychologist, right, on YouTube, who's going to give you some helpful knowledge, like talk to your friends, blah, blah, blah. But it's going to have this very moralistic vibe about them. It's like, like you should be stronger, you should do things better. So that's one arc of things that will happen. So this person who's feeling stressed out is now feeling stressed out and judged and told that her issue is that she's not strong enough, right? It's a weakness on her part. So that's option one. Option two is you're feeling suicidal. How do I kill myself? You search for that, right? Immediately you'll get a pop-up from Google saying suicide is bad, do not commit suicide, call this number if you're feeling lonely. It's like, okay, so what I'm being told now is suddenly like I'm a problem and there's something wrong and I need to call a number. Like there's no psychologist or any person you go to, like let's say I come to you, Amrita, and you're like my doctor, and I say, listen, I feel like killing myself. You're like, hold on a minute, call this number. This is not okay, right? It's a very clinical response to a thing. Now, what is happening is then they go on Twitter and they say, I'm feeling pissed off. And then there's like all sorts of stuff that's happening there as well. So the reason I say it's a fake news problem is you don't go on the internet when you, let's say, um, when you are like feeling ill, like when you have cancer or something, right? You don't go online and say, what are the, how do I cure it, and get all these like random homegrown remedies, like take 4 sips of neem water on a full moon night to cure your cancer. Like you would call that fake news, right? Now, the issue is that we think of mental health as a like a problem that doesn't have a scientific solution or an institutional solution. So we let a lot of this nonsense take its path. If any of those things happen, we would stop and like intervene much more loudly and say, look, this is an issue. Like we have to stop all of this rubbish about random YouTube knowledge about be stronger and be mentally fit, and like random punishments about calling a number and how suicide is illegal. I don't think there's actually any empathy that any of the search engines or any of the systems of information provide us when people have moments when they want to reach out to things. So that's, I think, one set of problems. Second set of problems is it's not like Zomato, right? Like if I want to have a hamburger or Swiggy, right? If I want to have a hamburger, I'll go, I want to eat a hamburger, and I'll get 5 options, right? And I'll choose one, and there'll be ratings and rankings, etc. Here I say I'm not, I want to go see a doctor. I'll get this random YouTube thing. I'll get like 17 people who have SEO skills on Google Maps, and I'll be no better off than when I started. So, from an infrastructural perspective, I think we need to do 2 things. And from a policy and intervention perspective, we need to do 2 things. The first is we need to clean up the nonsense information on the internet. And by nonsense information is we need to highlight what is actually factual about mental health, and rather than all of these like homegrown things. So I'm all for actually censorship in this case. I think the second thing is we need to have some sort of accreditation system and some sort of access system that young people have towards doctors, and some sort of transparent processes. I have a friend who was looking for a mental health practitioner and has gone through all varies of induction programs and procedures that have completely put my friend off mental counseling in India, because one person sent them a 500-page document to fill in as a pre-read, and the other person just like after 3 sessions ghosted them. So there's a lot of like random stuff happening that needs to be cleaned up. So there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of
Yeah.
demand, but there's a lot of snake oil and bad supply.
Yeah. Okay. So you've said a few controversial things in there. We have to unpack a little bit in the time we have. I think what you've said that everybody will agree with, who's even done a little bit of research in this space, is there is an issue looking for help, finding that help that suits you, and kind of like you said, there is a lot of snake oil in the system, right? Accreditation is an issue. Completely take your point. I do want to ask you though, when you look at search and you say search is a critical intervention point, and that you are pro censorship in this area of cleaning up the news. Um, I'm not sure everyone would, because we do see, right, with let's say non-mental health issues, people looking for home remedies, people saying like, look, I want like to go the holistic way, not the allopathic way. There is a whole debate on looking at mental illness as not just a biomedical issue, but like looking at it structurally, intersectionally, and so on. And rather than getting lost in some the weeds in some of this, I do want to ask you: did you find a difference when it came to search in language? Did you find a difference in terms, you kind of alluded to the difference in what I search for privately or what I'm talking about publicly? Was there something there that anything that resonated with you?
So let me answer the first sort of pushback from you, just to clarify my position. I don't think that holistic remedy is lower than psychotherapy. Like that's not the argument I'm making. I think snake oil people who are peddling bullshit need to be stopped, because they do a
Yeah.
lot more damage than good, right?
Call out
So
and say. I think just when you say censorship, it's a touchy time right now. So completely take it.
no,
Yeah.
it's
No, for
fine, it's
sure.
fine. Yeah, but materially, that's what it is, right? It's effectively like vaccine. We deplatformed all the anti-vaxxers, right? Nobody is saying, "Oh, anti-vaxxers." We deplatformed because it's dangerous. What we are finding, what I'm personally seeing, is that a lot of people are like they're not getting help that they need, right?
Yeah.
And they are
Yeah.
actually entering the internet and feeling worse. Now,
Hmm.
like that's, I think, the problem to solve. Uh, On the second point is there's no language issue, right? Like everybody is searching in their own languages, and we're seeing a magnitude of things happening across the world. I think the one interesting thing to note is that the conversation on social actually is where everybody gets caught up. The conversation on social, let me give you a really fun example. It's like, oh, I can't see this photo because I have OCD. Like that's a statement, right? Then someone will say, oh, you have OCD, you think you're special. Like, yeah, all you young educated people think that OCD is cool. Then third person will be like, actually OCD is not about this. OCD is about this. Here is this thing. That's like there's this crazy stuff happening, right? Then there's another sort of straight of conversations where someone's actually not feeling well and they're like meeting friends and meeting therapists and doing stuff online. Now, for me, social media has already reached a point where people have enough comfort with the discourse and the language and the ability to express themselves in very, very sophisticated ways, and therefore find some sort of help or find some sort of community. On search, you're sitting at your phone and saying, I am sad, right? You will never write that consistently and regularly on social media. I am sad. I need help. I am sad. I need help. I can't sleep at night. I'm always stressed. I wake up and my blood pressure is increasing, right? How do I get out of this? My parents won't allow me to do this. I feel fear. I wake up with sweat. Like these are things that are happening in the country. And most of those are going to these idiots that you need to deplatform. That's all I'm saying.
That's all you're saying. I too much to unpack there. Okay, so final question to you though. What would you want to really see in 2021? Do you have any follow-ups planned? What do you think is a good takeoff point?
So I think one of the things we're really focused on is not just so one of the things we're focused on is misinformation and incorrect information. And in particular, we're interested in two or three areas. One is around climate change. And the second is around vaccination and vaccine hesitancy. But the third, which is kind of an extension of the second, is around the space of medical knowledge, health, and well being. Now, there is a debate in some circles whether mental health classifies as a medical issue, but we're not in that camp. And for me, a large focus is on ensuring that the internet becomes a space which is a space where the kindness of people who are trying to help other people is amplified, where really empowering narratives around there being help, there being communities, there being conversations, there being connections, there also being apps and collectives like yourself that are doing things to help people. Like that is really a focus area. Now, what does that mean? Like, does that mean do we achieve that through, as I said, glibly censorship, or do we achieve that through ensuring that there is a concentrated effort by people who want to make an impact in the world, working together to ensure that people who are the most vulnerable, which is the person sitting in the middle of nowhere, opening up her phone and typing I am sad, gets the full benefit of Amrita and her team, even if it's virtually. And I think that's a very noble problem to solve, because that person can open up and get all the porn in the world, can get all the fake news in the world, can get all the torrents in the world, but can't get a single piece of actual human information that is empathetic, targeted, and helpful.
Wow, that's really, really well said. Thank you so much for taking the time, taking us through some of your thoughts. I want to say to all of you who've been watching, listening to some of the stories we've been bringing you, whatever you're going through, we do say this, it is more than a hashtag. You're not alone. I think part of the challenge that we've been facing, but the opportunity has been to share first person stories of lived experience, which we hope help move the needle. Thanks again, Dr. Angad Chowdhry and your team for what you've been doing, and speak to you soon.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Thanks.